in order. I'd like the record to reflect that we do have a quorum present and ready to conduct business. We will begin with item number 20, agenda item number 22, which is Basin Directors Reports. Let's start out with the San Juan, San Miguel, Dolores River Basins Directors Report. Director Montgomery.
Thank you, and good morning, and it's great to be back with you. You don't know how much I missed all of you. I want to thank all the local effort that went into having the meeting here in Pagosa Springs. It's really wonderful to bring the board down to the Southwest and to remind you guys on how large this is, as well as beautiful. I really appreciate the reception by San Juan Conservancy District, as well as Southwest Water Conservation District. That was a really nice event. Appreciate that. I want to give you guys some great news. And just to demonstrate how your $50,000 feasibility grant to the Norwood Raw Water Project has leveraged over $1.2 million. Norwood just received a $690,000 grant from DOLA. They're going to be able to start construction on the project this fall. For phase one, which really covers the entire town. They've sold over 107 taps. They've received generous funding from Southwest Water Conservation District, from the Basin Roundtables, and they're going to be able to do it without a loan for phase one, and then phase 2 and 3 will be easier to get a loan for. So I've been stopped on the street. People know that CWCB started the project, and it wouldn't have happened without that first original $50,000. So I just really want to thank you, and the town is super excited. And then I want to just mention a little bit more about the Dolores project, which Linda talked about yesterday. I have a quick little film that was in the Cortez Journal, and I was wondering if we could show that really quick while you guys are getting that going. If we have a speaker today, so it might work. But a huge shout out to Mike Preston, Ken Curtis, the Dolores Water Conservancy Board for the managed releases that have happened this year. As Linda mentioned yesterday, they've been working really closely with with American Whitewater, with the Dolores River Boating Advocates, with TNC, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Bureau of Rec, all of them coming together to manage the spill for not only boating, but also the environment. And I can tell you that it has been a huge boost to the economy for this little rural, very, very rural section of Southwest. The amount of boats that have been running by. I talked to the woman, Melanie, who was parking cars at Slick Rock. And I think on one day of the 4,000 release, there was 140 cars that she parked. It has just been this incredible burst of river running energy. This was the largest managed release, I guess, since 2008. And, last year there had been a lot of just grumblings about communication, and this year it has been amazing communication. The effort that Mike and the board did to really get the word out and allow people to manage, and not only that, but also there were at least 4 shuttle companies that I saw signs for. So just getting that word out allowed people to say, hey, I'm going to make a little bit of profit off of this run and be able to have a little bit of a business. So just great work. I was lucky enough to spend the last 6 days getting off on Sunday on the river. Hadn't been on the river for years and years and years, and saw bear tracks, saw mountain sheep, it felt like I was in Costa Rica with the birds. Lots of beaver. It was just an incredible wilderness experience. This was a little film, if we can show it, that Light Hawk and the Nature Conservancy put together on this 4,000 release, which was like flushing flow for the river.
Fight over the Lord. Managers
released record flows of 4,000 cubic feet per second from McPhee Reservoir.
That's the wilderness study area. And you can see
Researchers are studying the ecological benefits of the rare flushing flows on the sometimes water-starved river that feeds southwest Colorado. From above, you can see the river overflowing its banks and filling backwaters relied on by native fish. Snags on the river are being washed away, and the river corridor is wider and breaching its banks. 5 monitoring sites are recording the ecological benefits of this year's release. The release recharges groundwater aquifers, and the flooding allows native seeds to be dispersed beyond the river corridor. Above average snowpack allowed water managers to easily fill McPhee Reservoir and provide the 4,000 CFS release.
All right, that's all I have for my board report. Thank you.
Questions for Director Montgomery? Thank you. Let's move on to the Gunnison River Basin. Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a brief report this morning. The Gunnison Basin, Upper Gunnison Basin snowpack ended the year at 138% of average, so we will fill our reservoirs. The inflows to Blue Mesa have been scaling down every 15 days as the forecasts come out, but currently it's forecast to be 825,000 acre feet this year, which will fill. And the Black Canyon water right provides for a one-day peak flow every year. And this year it'll be 6,400 CFS, which means they will have to spill Crystal Reservoir, which is a pretty spectacular site. They say they're going to start spilling on May 18th. So if anybody wants to see the rooster tail coming over the top of the dam, that's the time to be down there. Taylor Park Reservoir did well. We're going to have an excellent boating year on the Taylor River. We'll ramp the releases up to 400 CFS the 1st of June. And all of June will be 400. All of July and August will be 500 CFS. So it's going to be a good boating season on the Taylor. They can boat the Taylor at about 250. So those are good boating flows. And just like Director Montgomery said, that's a great economic boost for our area. The Upper Gunnison District is managing a watershed planning effort this board approved a grant for recently, and I just wanted to say that it's progressing very nicely. We've divided the Upper Gunnison Basin into the sub-basins, and we're taking them a few at a time. We're doing Ohio Creek and East River and Lake Fork. Right now, we've hired basin coordinators, and we've approved their operating plan for outreach. We've got a good start on the framework for how the plan is going to go forward. It's going to be a 5-year process, but we're off to a good start. The Gunnison Basin Roundtable has cut back on its meeting dates, so I don't have much to report. The Roundtable will be meeting on June 5th, and we'll be looking at a number of water supply reserve fund applications, which this board will be seeing soon. And there's some additional work being done on watershed planning and the North Fork of the Gunnison. And the good news is the snow in Gunnison has finally melted. It hasn't quite gotten there in Crested Butte, but we're out from under the deluge this year. And that, Mr. Chairman, concludes my report.
Questions for Director McLeod? Thank you. We'll move on to the North Platte. What I would like to do to start out with, I would certainly like to thank the San Juan Water Conservancy District and also Southwest Water Conservation Board for your wonderful tour. That was very informative. I really appreciate that. I got really a lot out of that. And also would like to thank the town of Pagosa Springs for their our gift bags. Truly, it was an all hands on deck effort in the community and the surrounding area to put on an excellent program for us when we came to town here. So we truly do appreciate that. There in North Park, since I last talked to you folks, we saw warmer than normal temperatures in March to about the middle of April. In fact, everybody was pretty much in panic mode because the runoff started and we were totally unprepared for that. Towards the end of April, the last 2 weeks of April, it finally cooled off and give the irrigators a chance to kind of catch up, so to speak. Because like I say, we were caught off guard. This doesn't happen in North Park that time of the year, but things are more of on a normal track now. So it looks like it's not going to be a banner year for us, but we would expect a normal runoff and probably a normal hay production year this year. So our roundtable hasn't met for a little while, but we do have some projects in the works. I think we'll be coming to the board with some grants. One of them is a little bit unusual for us. The North Platte Basin would like to get in the weather mod business, so to speak. So we're pretty happy about that. It took a little while, but I guess as anyone knows, you have to start somewhere, and that's what we're doing. So we're very pleased about that. And with that, I think that's the end of my report. Thank you. Let's move to the City and County of Denver. Director Wells, please.
Talk a little bit about water and then about some other things. There it is. So basically for precipitation and snowpack in our Denver watersheds, the South Platte is bumping along right at normal accumulation, and the Colorado watershed is bumping along just above normal. So as you know, we had a bad start and then a lot of snow and then nothing, and so the line goes up and down. But overall, as a running average, it's South Platte's normal. That probably will change this weekend or today, and then the Colorado's just above normal. With regard to the enlargement of Gross Reservoir, we had a milestone on Tuesday. We submitted our final mitigation plan to the Corps of Engineers. That's been a long and difficult process. They only found 3 impacts that needed to be mitigated. And what they involve is a stream restoration project in South Boulder Creek, which is where Gross Reservoir is located. That one, we determined that we could do a project in partnership with the city of Boulder that had a project in mind that was pretty much designed, so that helps enormously. And the Colorado River, we tried a little bit with Granby Ranch. That didn't work out too well. The public access was kind of an issue, and there's a railroad easement. So you just kind of have to quit if you want to do anything within a decade. If you're dealing with the railroad. So instead, it'll be a section of Williams Fork that on property that we own. So those 2 projects, and then we have to replace wetlands, which we intended to do with the purchase of what's called the toll property in Boulder County. But the Corps didn't accept that because we were conveying, actually the Forest Service is purchasing that land from us. And the Corps determined that the Forest Service protections were not sufficient to protect the wetlands in perpetuity. The Forest Service took some, that was insulting to them, but the Corps stood firm that because the Forest Service is a multi-use agency, that they couldn't be relied upon to protect the wetlands. That's a national thing that's got to change, frankly, but we didn't have time to wait. So we actually have some fins in South Park. And after a lot of negotiation, the Corps accepted that as mitigation. So that's great news. I mean, there's all other kinds of mitigation. This just happens to be the ones that the Corps found that, in addition to all the other things we're doing, needed to be mitigated. The other thing that happened since the last meeting is we have filed our license amendment with FERC. The Gross Reservoir has hydropower and is a FERC licensed facility. And in that process, they had a 60-day comment period, I think, that ended March 31st. And a number of Denver Water's partners under the CRCA filed letters of support, and not form letters, really kind of heartfelt letters. That included Summit County, the River District, Clinton Reservoir, Eagle Park Reservoir, Middle Park Water Conservancy District, Winter Park Water and Sand, Grand Valley Water Users Association, Ute, and Orchard Mesa. So that will tell you progress can in fact be made. And clearly we have a different relationship with those entities than we did before the CRCA. So that was very gratifying. And the process will be proceeding, the FERC process. I think Andrew can pull up a video. So as you may or may not know, Denver Water is redeveloping its entire campus. All the buildings are being torn down. This happens to be a video from RK Mechanical. This is our new data center. We have a lot of servers. We have all kinds of stuff because we have, remote facilities in addition to all the data that anybody would have, with 250,000 accounts that get billed monthly, and property in 7 counties, and facilities that need to be connected, and so on and so forth. And we have often had trouble keeping the computers cool in our current building. So this is the data center. This is a 2-minute video of them assembling it. You can go ahead and start it. I think it just has a little music bumming in the background. But this is, now we have video. Now we have sound when you don't really need to hear anything. But this was constructed off-site in Henderson, Colorado, and moved in to the building just recently. But first of all, it's very complex, as you can see, but it's very compact. There's no space wasted. So it should reduce our energy consumption for this data center considerably. And it'll have, like the elevated floors and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I don't know how many people actually worked on it, but a lot, because you can see them all there scurrying around. But it's really pretty interesting how, how much capacity you can get in a small space, and how much we need. We are always, outstripping our ability to store and manage data. So I'm going to talk about something else while this is going on, because I don't have any commentary to add. It just is kind of there. We also issued bonds last week, $200 million worth of revenue bonds, of which 142 million were designated as green bonds. This is our first green bond issuance, which is intended to support projects that are green. And it was really our admin building, which will be LEED Platinum certified, and will have, if we're lucky, on-site recycling of non-potable water for toilet flushing, and a lot of other things. So they qualify as green bonds, and that issuance had its intended effect, which was to attract green bond investors, which are its own part of the market. So there were 5 investors who bought 11% of that issuance and dedicated to specific dedicated green bond portfolios. So there are people who invest in green bonds and others, and then there are other entities, perhaps a pension plan or somebody who wants to have a green bond portfolio. So we attracted investors that we have not dealt with before. And so that was really very successful. Our all-in, whatever you call it, net interest rate is 3.71%, which is about 1% higher than last year, but that's the nature of interest rates now. And so we're very pleased with that. It does allow us money to finance our campus redevelopment, and we have a lot of other things coming up, a new treatment plant and an enlargement of a reservoir. So we'll be spending a lot of money, but this was an opportunity to do green bonds, and it was really quite successful. So it was a great event. So I think that concludes my presentation.
Mr. Chairman, I was
Dr.
curious
Stahl.
as to what kind of discount did the green bonds get or give you?
They don't necessarily, they're usually a little more expensive to some extent in the interest rate because the market's smaller.
Okay.
Yeah, I can,
Oh, that's, I just kind of,
I'll find you the report and send it to you.
Thanks.
So you can kind of,
Any other questions for Director Wells? Thank you. Let's move on to the Yampa White and Green River Basin. Director Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the San Juan Water Conservancy District and the Southwest Water Conservation District for Tuesday's great tour. It was wonderful to get out on the land and see the lay of the land. It's very different than just looking at a map. So much appreciated for the effort to put that together. Also, last night's reception was very warm, and I also want to thank the city of Pagosa Springs for their warm welcome and a tour of the greenhouses. That's a very interesting project and money well invested in the community, which has an impact to the community. Yeah. What? In Basin News, our second in the second week of March, our Basin SWE pretty much peaked and has been on the downhills ever since. That's about 7 weeks early. It peaked at about 78%, so we were one of the lowest in the state for most of the winter. With warmer weather, we've seen the rivers rise a little bit. We had a little snow in April, recovered our SWE a little bit, but it's begun its descent again, and we expect it to run off probably about 2 to 4 weeks early this year. So we're going to have a little longer irrigation season than usual. All our reservoirs should fill, the few we have. So we're not too concerned about water storage at this point. Roundtable news, Wilson Water is still running analysis of our IPPs in a new model that we have greater confidence in than a few years ago. So that work is ongoing. It's also including not just consumptive, but also non-consumptive IPPs. Basin Roundtable in the last 2 meetings has expressed some concerns about the SWASI process. And I think the presentation I saw yesterday, I think would be a great presentation to give to them. And I'm looking forward to hosting some staff up there to perhaps give that presentation to them and answer questions that I can't. And lastly, on funded projects on the Yampa River above Hayden, efforts are still underway to restore the reach above the Gibraltar ditch to improve its river habitat and the connection of the ditch to the river so it can receive its allocated and decreed flows. So in June, stakeholders will be reviewing the 60% design, and the contractor will submit permit applications for anticipated construction sometime this fall. Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Gallagher? With that, that concludes our Basin Directors Report section. We are ready to move on to Agenda Item 23, criteria for grant applications under projects funding bill. Morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Director Wattenberg and members of the board. Carly Brown, for the record, Section Chief of the Interstate and Federal and Water Information Section. I'm here actually presenting this on behalf of Steve Miller, who, as Lauren mentioned yesterday, is going to be retiring on June 30th. So for the record, hopefully I'll have Steve listen back to hopefully hear the board's approval. And I just want to say that Steve has been a huge resource to me in the time that I've been at the agency, and I'm really pleased I got the chance to work with him, and we're going to miss him immensely. And I also figured out exactly how long he had been with CWCB, 26 and a half years. So quite a legacy, and quite a passionate protector of Colorado's right to use its water. So the item before the board today is a request for assistance for the technical approval of funds for technical assistance items. And I'm just looking at my papers and I'm realizing I brought up the wrong memo. So if you could excuse me really quickly, I'll be right back. My apologies to the board. The item before you is item number 23, criteria for grant applicants under projects bill funding for technical assistance for federal irrigation improvement cost sharing programs. The item that was in the projects bill is $500,000 appropriated for helping provide technical assistance to applicants seeking competitive federal grant funds. The type of funds that we're talking about are things like the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Program, which is used to reduce salt loading within the Colorado River Basin. The RCPP out of the USDA's program, which is targeted at projects within the Colorado River Basin. Additional NRCS programs such as EQIP, AWEP, Conservation Innovation Grants, and Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart Grants, which provide 50-50 cost share to irrigation and water districts, as well as states and tribes and other entities. We in the past have had two similar funding pots of money, and this pot of money that we have here before you today, we have re-evaluated as to what is most effective for the type of applicants that we saw coming into the door. A lot of these, we have an idea of the types of projects that will likely come into the door, and we want to have streamlined criteria that makes it easy for them to qualify for these federal programs. The criteria that's on page 4 that's proposed before you is only a single page of criteria, and it's meant to be very streamlined and very accessible to applicants. It will have no mandatory cost share because there's significant federal funding that's already being leveraged. The type of projects that we're likely to see are grant writing assistance, feasibility, design and cost estimates, environmental compliance projects. The projects would be ones that would have water conservation or irrigation efficiency enhancement, things that would help achieve the objectives of those federal programs, including improving salinity loading and improving system delivery efficiency. We're expecting to see about 100,000 for of salinity projects for the salinity control program at a minimum. And then we're also expecting RCPP projects potentially for silt and Lower Gunnison. We have already expended all of the previous monies available in the two previous projects bill grant funding opportunities. So we expect that we would fully expend this money. The two requests before you today are to approve the proposed criteria and procedures that are in the booklet, but also to approve the ability to use up to $200,000 of this funding as soon as it becomes available on July 1st. Director's discretion is asked for grants that are less than $25,000, and board approval would be asked for grants that are larger than $25,000. At this point, does the board have any questions?
Any questions for Carly?
I do.
Director Wells.
I noticed that there's a category for USBR water smart programs, and which is new and would be great. It's designed to conserve, generally speaking, agricultural efficiency, but also talks about renewable energy and some other things. Somebody mentioned a program yesterday where there might be some hydropower in the agricultural, can't remember who that was, probably the agriculture secretary. At any rate, the criteria, these aren't numbered, but and the page that's entitled HB 17-1248 proposed criteria, at E on the bottom, it talks about if requests exceed funds, here's what we're going to look at. There's there's nothing on there that relates to water smart projects that might be submitted. And so I think with that new program, or at least one I hadn't heard of before, we probably need to have some criteria that relates to that program. So.
Thank you, Director Wells. We will add that change.
Any other questions? I don't believe so. Thank you. It is an action item. If the board's pleasure, we can add that addition, Director Wells, if that's deemed appropriate, and move forward with this. Director Wells.
I'll move approval of staff recommendation with the understanding that some criteria will be added that reflect the Water Smart program.
Been moved by Director Wells, second by Director Montgomery, to move staff recommendation, agenda item 23 with the additions. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's move on to agenda item 24. Oh, I'm sorry. Acting Director Rios.
Thank you. Quick and very important announcement. Coffee is here. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please proceed. I was.
Coffee is a very important thing.
No, I was actually. I thought you were still setting up. Please go ahead, Eric.
Well, for the record, Eric Sky, Interstate Federal and Water Information Section. This morning, I'm here to present agenda item 24. It is a House Bill 15-1178 emergency dewatering grant for the continuation of the Gilchrist Area Pilot Project. I did just hand out a redlined memo for everybody this morning. The big differences between the memo that you received prior and the one that's going around this morning is a budgetary change. So right after we had sent out this memo, we realized that we probably needed a little more augmentation water to ensure that Central would remain whole throughout the pilot project. So the budgetary difference is $12,500, and that is an increase of an augmentation lease from 500 acre feet to 600 acre feet. So those are the big differences between what you received before and what's before you this morning. So just to give you a little bit of background on the pilot project, last May, the board did approve year one of the Gilchrist Area Pilot Project for $140,000 or $140,329. The purpose of this project is to try and change the water budget in the Gilchrist area by incentivizing more groundwater pumping and trying to lower the high groundwater table that's out there right now. The map that I've currently got up on the board for you guys really demonstrates why we selected this 7-section area as the best place to do this pilot. You can see that in this 7-section area, the depth of groundwater is as low as 0 to half a foot. In some places, the fields actually were inundated by the high groundwater. So this project, as with last year, has two options for our participants. Option A is to pump up to their 2017 allotment from Central Conservancy District, and that will happen by giving them $60 per acre foot to pump up to that 2017 allotment. Option B allows them to pump up to their full contractual amount through Central by providing the augmentation water. Now we're providing the augmentation water and that's $60 per acre foot for every acre foot pumped above their 2013-2015 average. So this year we're looking at 6 participants in the area. The farms here are the contracts and the farms that are going to be participating. All the wells highlighted are the ones that are under these Central contracts. You can see that they're actually the same participants that we had last year. Last one who actually decided that he was going to participate last year right before we began everything. So it's all the same folks. The difference in participation this year is we did have one participant switch from option A to option B and another participant switch from option B to option A. So if that makes sense to you guys at all, essentially they just decided to switch up what they were going to do. So what we're looking at this year is 1,243 acre feet total that's going to be pumped out of the 7-section area. That's including the 2017 allotment and everything that's pumped above their 2017 allotment. We're looking at 903 acre feet pumped beyond their 2013-2015 average. And then 423.91 acre feet is going to be the replacement obligation for the project. So just a quick gander at the budget. Like I mentioned, the difference between the memo you received before and the one this morning is that $12,500. That's reflected up in budget line item 1. That's purchasing the augmentation water from Greeley Water and Sewer Board at $125 an acre foot. So that 100 acre feet that we had to make up there is why we had an additional $12,500 in the budget. So total is $107,355.60. If we're looking at the criteria that we established way back in July of 2015, we do have one issue that we are currently working through. So Central Colorado Water Conservancy District had their board meeting this week, and they still have a few things that we need to work through for the project. So they have a couple of issues that they contacted us about. Director Stope will be able to speak more on that, but we're going to work with them and we're going to get this worked out so that they're on board, because if they don't approve, then we can't move forward. And so that brings us to our staff recommendation this morning. CWCB staff recommends that the board approve the House Bill 15-1178 dewatering grant request from West Greeley Conservation District for up to $107,355.60 contingent on Central and Greeley Water and Sewer Board approval. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Questions for Eric? Seeing none, we have staff recommendation before us. Director Gallagher.
Mr. Chairman, I will move approval of staff recommendation on item 23 or 24.
Motion by Director Gallagher. Second by Director McLeod to move staff recommendation agenda item 24. Further discussion? Call for the vote.
Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Let me make a quick comment. The technical committee from the South Platte Basin Roundtable, which myself and Eric and Andy Moore here are members of, been working with this group, and it's rather complex. I was listening these out that we have 5 groups we're working with: the irrigators, the Conservation District, the Central Water Conservancy District, the town of Greeley's Water Department, and then obviously with this board. And so I think we're trying to improve the pilot for this second year. And as Eric mentioned, there's still a more negotiation to be done, but we're hopeful that this will help show that we can make a difference in the water balance in these high groundwater areas. And in addition to that, there's some other funds that we've been able to identify that are not included in this request to try to incentivize irrigators to use some moisture probes. We had a trial that last year, it worked out quite well. And so there's a lot of good things going there. And then you'll see another request probably in July from this town of Gilchrist on dewatering that also will access some of these funds. So a lot of things going on there, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Great, thank you, Dr. Stoll, and thank you. You've really been a champion of this project, and also with the board staff. So a lot of hard work.
Board staff has really been critical in making all this happen. In addition to Eric and Andy, Kevin Ryan from Division Water Resources has been a very helpful participant from the state side, and then we have members up and down the river that are participants too.
Very good. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Let's see. Let's move to, let's go to 26. No.
You can get coffee.
It's all right. Oh, I know. Thank you. We're going to take a break. Please go ahead, Kirk.
Morning, Chairman Wattenberg, members of the board. Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief. Next agenda item is 26A, and it is the board's opportunity to see where we are with the money within the loans and grant programs within CWCB. I had Andrew hand out the latest information on the account balances and understand that in the process of the board's fiscal cycle, we are at really the last opportunity for the board to approve items under this program until the end of the fiscal year. The state fiscal year ends on June 30th. And so the next time we present this information, we will close out this current fiscal year and then project next fiscal year's opportunities and availability of funds. And so in the handout, not a lot has changed. We do continue to update some of the projections as they come out when it is items that we expect cash to flow in. We get federal mineral lease into the construction fund, though the projections for federal mineral lease, which are on line 5, they don't tend to fluctuate a lot. A couple years ago, we saw revenues up around $16-17 million. Projections this year are down around 9. They've been pretty steady at that level. One of the big changes, a couple board meetings ago, I reported that the city of Aurora submitted their payment in full of $70 million, and so that's reflected on line item number 3, but you've seen that before. Moving down to line 13 under projects that the board approves, we did remove an agenda item that was a significant dollar amount. I want to say it was about $8 million, and so that number on line 13 does not reflect that. Actually, I think it was $7 million to the city of Walsenburg. So that number is higher than it should be as a result. We hope to bring that loan back in July, so we'll shift at that time. As you can see down in lines 19, 20, and 21, I reflect that at 0 until the end of June. At that time, at that moment in time, all those numbers jump up as reflected in the projects bill referenced under 19, 20, and 21. And the big one number there is the $90 million appropriated by the projects bill for the Windy Gap loan. We expect the folks from the Windy Gap subdistrict to present to the board in September in Walden. And so the projected end balance for this fund is about $10 million at the end of this fiscal year. And we estimate that we need about $8 to $10 million to begin fiscal year 17-18 for our operations and some of the non-reimbursables that automatically move through the process. So any questions on construction fund?
Questions for Kirk? I don't believe so.
Moving on to severance tax. An odd looking item is line number 4, which is the cash coming in from severance tax. We continue to see some unique numbers coming through severance tax, and I think it's related to the refunds and the way that some of the calculations occur. You'll see that my projection from March was and still is 7 million, because we will not receive another projection until the June 20th timeframe. But it shows that we only are expected to receive $7 million. We've already received close to 16.5. I've had a couple explanations on it. I'm happy our number is higher than the projection. I don't expect to return any of that, so I think cash in hand is boss. So we'll assume that we're in good shape there. Moving down, another unique aspect of severance tax on this sheet is line 16, which refers to the restricted severance tax money. Senate Bill 16218 last year at the end, prior year in 2016, at the end of the session, if you remember, the JBC restricted some cash funds, in particular the CWCB's severance tax perpetual base fund. They restricted us $19.1 million. They also restricted DOLA funds and also some operational account funding. And in that bill, it allowed the JBC to vote to release those funds if time was appropriate. And we received a letter from Senator Lambert, the chair of the JBC, that those funds were released from restriction. And so that's why that 0 is now showing up on line 16. And under the next agenda item that I'll present will reflect that $19.1 million related to the loan guarantee fund. So I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next agenda item. So you can see this, the cash amount of unrestricted dollars is significantly high in severance tax. It's about 100 million right now, but we do project that to come down once these project bill item transfers occur. So we will be looking at about $30 million available in this account for loans at the next meeting. So that's it for my presentation. If there are any questions.
Any questions for Kirk? I don't think so. Can we move on to B? Does that work for you? 26B.
26B, Kirk Russell, CWCB Section Chief. 26B is an action item, and it is related to the Loan Guarantee Fund, which is a fund that was created in the 2017 Projects Bill 1248. And if the board remembers, during the preparation of the water plan funding efforts, one of the items was to create a loan guarantee fund that would help regional water projects possibly leverage some money in the market, benefiting a entity that was contributing pooled financing to a regional project to try to homogenize their credit rating. The project's bill included that item, and at the time that the water plan and this board discussed a loan guarantee fund, we estimated that we had about $50 million available to do that. At the time, we had envisioned that the Windy Gap Firming project might be a great candidate to try to utilize that money. As that project was developing some of its decisions, we began to set this up at 50 million. Then the Senate Bill 218 occurred, restricting that 18 million. Well, that kind of squeezed the funds available. And so we dropped that down to 30 million in the projects bill. During the effort of writing the projects bill, we were uncertain as to some of the state budget concerns. And I was concerned that if we set aside 50 million or even 30 million, it may squeeze us to where we couldn't use that for other purposes. And so at the time, and this is a good 4 or 5 months ago, at the time I put a statement in the projects bill that allowed the board to adjust that as needed at this board meeting. And so This at this time, I'm asking the board to approve the $30 million that I can report to the Treasury to transfer over from the severance tax into this loan guarantee fund, and it will be reserved for that purpose until we utilize it. So, if there are any questions, I would be happy to present the recommendation.
Questions for Kirk? Please proceed. Oh, excuse me, Director McLeod.
So if we transfer it into this guarantee fund and you don't need to use it right away, can it carry over from year to year and perhaps accumulate more if you think you need more in the future?
I believe in a future projects bill, we can add more money to this if we have it available and we see a need for that purpose. Yes.
But this can sit until you find the need. It's not at risk of being moved elsewhere in the meantime.
That is correct. And in the projects bill, I requested that all interest earnings remain in the severance tax perpetual base fund. So this will sit at $30 million until we use it for the purpose designed under the loan guarantee. It's important to note that it is assumed that that money will just stay there and never be dispersed into the market, because it is just that it's in a guarantee fashion, somewhat of an insurance that a user or somebody that we contract for its use will have that as a backstop in the event something happens to their ability to repay a bond or some private lender.
Further discussion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if there are no other questions, I would move approval of the staff recommendation for item 26B.
Been moved by Director McLeod, second by Director Wells, to move staff recommendation, agenda item 26B. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's move to 26C, if we could, please.
Director Rottenberg, Carly Brown, Section Chief of the Interstate and Federal Section. This was a late addition to the agenda, so I have printed copies of this item. If the board doesn't have their digital copy queued up that was distributed last week. Does anybody need it? Would anyone like a copy?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So we squeezed this agenda item in to share some good news financially. You might remember that I came before you back in January to ask for authorization for some proposed projects under the Species Conservation Trust Fund bill. That's an annual designation that the Executive Director of the Department of Natural Resources issues recommendations to the General Assembly for projects related to species conservation and habitat conservation as well. And typically that money is split half between CWCB and half to CPW. Now, last year we faced some significant severance tax shortfalls in revenues, and so the amount that had been appropriated for 2016 actually had to be restricted by DNR, and so DNR was being very prudent with its money and decided to have only $1.5 million of requests to the legislature for 2017. Luckily, the legislature saw that there was this need, and they decided to infuse about $4 million back into the Species Conservation Trust Fund. So DNR was able to backfill some existing projects and also allow us to bump up what our request was of the legislature for this year's Species Conservation Trust Fund bill. So what I'm presenting to you today is information only. I want to let you know how that final recommendation went to the legislature and was indeed passed. On page 2 of this memo, you'll see that we increased our asks for the Platte River Recovery Implementation Program to $875,000. We significantly increased our ask for the Upper Colorado River Recovery Program to $950,000. And for the Selenium Management Program, initially we didn't think we had enough money to put anything towards that at all. And the group was going to go back and sort of look at the research that had done in the past and take it from there. Luckily, since we did have this ability, we wanted to give it a little bit of money to work with as it does that evaluation of existing research. So that is now funded at $100,000. And additionally, towards the bottom of this memo, you'll see the money that was backfilled to the 2016 project authorizations. So I'm happy to take any questions at this time. Otherwise, thank you.
Any questions for Director Gallagher? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't think so.
Thank you.
I think we're good. Thank you. Let's take a short break at this period of time and everybody can get their coffee and we'll go. Let's be back in 15-20 minutes. 28A.
Good morning, Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff. For the record,
Good morning.
on loud enough. I don't hear an echo, so it sounds weird. I'm presenting agenda item. This one is 28A. It's a loan payment deferment request by the Box Elder Basin Regional Stormwater Authority. The Box Elder Stormwater Authority was created to look at stormwater problems within the Box Elder Basin. This map shows a rough idea of where the basin is. Largely, it's north of Fort Collins, and it even goes up into Wyoming. In 2006, a master plan was put together. I've listed here the Box Elder Alliance members. CWCB was actually part of the original Alliance members that put together the 2006 master plan. And out of that plan, they have identified 3 key projects that they wanted to do: the Coal Creek Flood Mitigation Facility, Eastside Detention Facility, and the Larimer-Weld Canal crossing structure. Also out of that, the Alliance members of Larimer County, Fort Collins, and Wellington became the member entities for the Stormwater Authority. The Coal Creek Flood Mitigation Facility was completed, and it largely benefited the town of Wellington, removing a lot of their town areas out of the floodplain. That was completed mostly with FEMA grants and some other cash funds, and so no debt was required for that project. Eastside Detention Facility, CWCB was involved in. We had a loan for the actual dam itself and also the County Road 52 crossing. County Road 52 is the county road just north on this map. That project has also been completed. And here's pictures of this, the top picture showing County Road 52 crossing, the culverts that were put in place. Eastside Detention Facility dam is the road that you see there. And then the Day Partnership Farm is to the right. And then the picture on the bottom showing from the bottom side of the flood control dam. Again, the Eastside Detention Facility dam is going from the left and then curving north, and you can see Box Elder Creek. And so in flood flows, the intent will be for this to fill up and flood rather than downstream. Part of the Eastside Detention Facility in conjunction was the Larimer-Weld Canal crossing structure. This was just downstream of the Eastside Detention Facility. That project was also successfully completed, and CWCB also had a loan for that project as well. Combined, the Eastside Detention Facility and the Larimer-Weld Canal crossing reduced flood flows within this basin from 64 or 6,700 CFS to about 2,400 CFS in a 100-year flow, removed over 1,600 acres from the floodplain. And again, those projects have been successfully completed. So it brings us to the deferment request that Box Elder brought to us. It can be summed up in that their problem was they had a large unbudgeted 2017 expense. This was related to the Day Partnership settlement. Part of the Eastside Detention Facility was condemning a right-of-way. They paid the appraised value of that, and then there were some other concerns that were heard in the mediation court, such as impacts to groundwater and their wells, and so they agreed to settle with them for an additional amount of money, and that expense was not originally budgeted for 2017. The authority is funded by stormwater fees that are set the year prior, and so having a large unbudgeted expense, they're not able to react quickly for the fee payers to pay it right away. So the solution they've come up with was to ask us if we would defer the first payment on their loans, their 3 loans. They would be deferring the principal. They will still be paying the interest. And the loan terms would just be modified in that instead of a 15-year even payment, the first year is no interest, and then the remaining 14 years it'll pay off from there. There will be no change to the interest rate, and there's no change to the collateral. Table 2 shows a summary of the loan restructuring. I wanted to highlight it, particularly the number that's highlighted because the number in the board memo is incorrect. I inadvertently added another annual payment to them, which was pointed out that they didn't have to pay an extra annual payment. So you can see that the total impact to the authority is, if they carry this loan to term, they're interest over the life of the loan will increase by about $100,000. But the benefit to them is in 2017, the annual payment of almost $725,000 goes down to $240,000. This allows them the cash to pay the day settlement off in this year and then resume normal operations. Looking at their financials going forward, as I've mentioned, the 3 projects that they were created for are complete, so there's no more construction cost. They're finishing up with some FEMA letter of map revisions, so there's some extra costs there. So looking at 2019 and forward, really the only expense of the authority is mostly to pay us back, and then just some minimal operations expense. And the point of the authority was to accomplish these projects and also to obtain the debt for them. Once the debt is paid off to CWCB, the authority will cease to exist, and member entities will divide up the facilities that were created to take on the operations. So in summary, it's pretty straightforward from staff's point of view. There's no real impact to the construction fund. Their ability to repay us back is still strong. But I do understand from in 2017, they were unable to meet both the day settlement and our annual payment. However, going forward, this gets them on better track, and it removes a lot of the contingent liabilities that were out there with this day settlement. There was potential for this to go on 3, 4, 5 years. So the settlement now, I feel, is a good resolution for the authority, as it eliminates future uncertainty of their budgets. And again, as I've shown, after this is over, they will be in a strong position to maintain payments. Now, I do want to mention that the town of Wellington, Wellington is a member entity, one of the founders, if you will, of the authority. They do have representation on the board of the authority. So there's the board members who represent Wellington, and then there's the town of Wellington itself. The town of Wellington has taken exception to the process that the authority is going through with the settlement with the days and with asking of this deferment request. The town has submitted a letter to that account, and it's been distributed to you. And the staff's view of this is it's largely Wellington is taking issue, sort of an in-house issue between them and the authority, whether or not the authority has to ask Wellington's permission for this deferment and the settlement, or whether the authority has that ability to do it on their own. I've spoken with Jeff Kahn, who's the attorney for Wellington. I've explained to him that our board will approve the request as far as yes, you can or cannot defer the loan payment, but our board is not in a position to look at the IGAs that set up the authority and make a determination if the authority can do this directly or if the member entities need to be a part of it. Largely, we rely on attorney opinion letters to ensure that when the authority signs an amendment contract, that contract has been duly authorized and executed, and so will be binding. I've explained to Jeff that is our process, that we will, it's inherent in our process that we get these attorney opinion letters, and he has requested the desired contract condition that you see on the screen is a request that Wellington would like to add under the staff recommendation. And it's simply that an attorney opinion letter shall be submitted to the CWCB prior to the execution of the loan modifications. Again, our staff's opinion is that this is our normal process. We will do this regardless. So I don't necessarily see a benefit to adding it, but it also, I don't see if it hurts us in any way to put in this as a contract condition. So you have staff recommendation as written. It's to approve the deferment request. Wellington has requested to add a condition that states an attorney's opinion letter shall be submitted to the CWCB prior to the execution of the loan modifications. With that, I will open up to the board if you have any questions of me. I also want to point out that Jerry Horak, president of the board of directors for the Stormwater Authority, is in the audience as well, and he's available for questions as well.
Questions for Jonathan at this point in time? Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan, just to be clear, from this letter, is the town hasn't agreed to the settlement? Is that what the issue is?
Yeah, so the town hasn't formally had a chance to agree on the settlement with the days or with asking for the deferment request. The town believes that they need to be a party to the settlement. And right now the authority does not believe they have to be.
Well, but if they agree to the settlement, isn't the modification necessary?
Yes.
I mean, you can't have it both ways, right?
Correct.
I'm not understanding the objection here.
The objective of Wellington?
Well, I don't understand their objection. They say, well, if they don't agree to the settlement, then what happens?
Yes.
Then that.
Would you like to speak, Jerry, to this a little bit? If you come to the mic and identify yourself, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak and answer maybe some questions or concerns. I'm Jerry Horak. I'm the chair of the Box Elder Basin Regional Stormwater Authority. I'm also on the Fort Collins City Council as the Mayor Pro Tem. And our council about a year ago decided to put someone from the council as our member of the authority. So this authority has five board members, one each from each of three entities, Larimer County, City of Fort Collins, and Wellington. And then the other two are joint appointments by the county and Fort Collins and by Wellington and the county. So that's how you get the 5 members. So to answer your question, I mean, when you cutting all through the stuff here, getting down to the bottom line for Wellington has been the first project, Clark Reservoir, went as projected and the costs were all done. It was fine. The east side detention had some issues for cost and went over the expectations, especially the initial ones in the plan, which is a plan way back 10 years ago. So those costs went higher and they were concerned about that. And so their objections now or concerns, they feel they have 2 levers, right? One is if this modification is done, and the other one is the final payment to the days, which is at the end of this year, because they're concerned the authority won't in good faith try to work out the long-term issues, i.e. capping the cost, which we have. The day settlement in itself was the single biggest liability. It was a big settlement, $1.65 million, $580,000 was already deposited into the court account and they took that out. And so we had to come up with $1 million this year. And that's a good deal because it could have been $3 million or more, or we could have spent $2.5 million and still been responsible for lots of stuff because you had groundwater, as you guys all know, and women, that using the consultants, you're talking $200 an hour, you're talking people testifying in court. I mean, it's insane. Was the property worth that much money? Probably not. Was the issues surrounding it worth doing that? Yes. It was. So that was a good deal. So Wellington's concern is they want some assurance costs have been capped and they're not going to increase. Towards that end, we have been working and had a recent meeting Tuesday morning with the members, the 3 members. Wellington's attorney was there, Jeff Kahn, as well as the mayor. And we've been working with them over the past year to try to resolve these issues. And the big question is the long-term maintenance of Clark, long-term maintenance of the east side detention. And so we're working on an agreement to get that done. So what we agreed to at this meeting was by June 15th, each member would agree that by December 1st, whatever date we agree, that we have an agreement in place prior to the last payment to the days. In doing that, hopefully then Wellington will have this agreement, will not object to this loan modification. And then they will see that we've worked out these other issues. And so I use the bad analogy here. We're 3 people who are married. We had a bad relationship, apparently, and some issues. We're working towards divorce, but before divorce, we're going to get separation. The separation will stay in place until the loan is paid off from the revenues coming in. And we'll have already worked an agreement out for the child, where the children are going to live and how long, which is dealing with Clark and Eastside Detention for the long term among the parties involved. That's what we're trying to do. And it's going to take, as you know, dealing with lawyers, a few months to get that done, but everyone is at the table now and working on it. I hope that helped you out, sir. Maybe not, but The big news is we've reduced, as Jonathan said, the liabilities. You know, the future liabilities have made more defined costs and can get to an end game. As well as we raised the rates in 2017 for this year to help with the fund balance. And over that time period, our fund balance should be fairly significant. So there is money there then to put in with each of the two projects for the long-term maintenance of those structures. And that's all being worked out among the parties. We have a draft agreement, and parties interested in taking it. Wellington wants to take over Clark project. Larimer County is willing to do the east side detention. I'm very confident in this, even dealing with lawyers. I did take the LSAT and pass, but I decided not to go to law school. That I think we're going to work this all out, and it's like I said, it is an inner squabble, but the squabble is reaching a resolution.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Jerry? Thank you for being here today. Any further questions for Jonathan? I don't believe so. Would you like to read the recommendation, if you would, please?
Yeah, so the staff recommendation is as per the memo. So it's as written on the memo. That staff recommendation does not have the additional contract condition that Wellington desires. That came in last night. So if the board feels that you would like to add this contract condition to help appease Wellington, you can do that through the motion to add that contract condition to the staff recommendation. Again, it's a process that staff will do regardless if it's a contract condition or not.
Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan, I don't like the characterization of appeasing Wellington, but you know, they are all our constituents. So since we do it anyway, I don't see any problem with adding that sentence to make everyone happier than they are now. So with that amendment, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the staff recommendation.
Motion by Director McLeod.
Yeah, I'll second.
Second by Director Wells. Discussion, Director Wells.
Yes. I'm assuming this is the attorney's opinion means the authority's attorney's opinion.
Yes, it's the authorities, and as their municipal, we receive bond counsel.
Because they're the borrower. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion. It's been moved and seconded to move staff recommendation, agenda item 28A, with additional conditions. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's go to 28B, please.
Good morning.
Good morning. Go ahead.
For the record, Anna Moss, CWCB Finance Staff. This is agenda item 28B. It's a change to an existing loan for the Grand Mesa Water Conservancy District. It was originally a loan for the Peak Reservoir and Blanche Park Reservoir Rehab projects. Let's see, let's hit on here. So this project started a number of years ago. The district purchased 2 reservoirs that had never been permitted, and they were breached for that reason. And so they bought these with the intent to rehab them, and it was going to add an extra 155 acre-feet of storage to their portfolio. And so originally they thought they could self-finance both of these rehabilitation projects. And as they got into things, it turned out it was a little more expensive than they anticipated. And so in March of 2011, they came in for a $75,000 Water Supply Reserve Fund grant. And they've spent those funds. Then they also came in for a loan of $227,750 or $250 in May of 2013. And as a result, they did spend some of the funds. They actually were successful at completing the work at Park Reservoir, which was great. So that one was estimated at $260,000, came in under budget at $235,000. And that was done a couple of years ago. But the Blanche Park Reservoir was a nearby site. And the permitting issues on that, it's located on Forest Service land. So they had some issues with getting their Forest Service permits. They had a little bit of struggle trying to get their plans approved through the SEO office. So they now have those approved plans in hand. They have their Forest Service permit. And so they expect to do all the construction this summer. They've spent about $140,000 to date. I think it's going to be another 348 to finish this project. And most of that actually is coming out of their own cash. So what they're asking for today is an extra $75,750 to get them to that finish line. And we'll keep all of the loan terms the same. It'll still be 1.55% at a blended rate for 20 years. We're going to keep the collateral the same as we always do for our public borrowers, just that pledge of assessment revenues. So with that, I'll gladly answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Anna? Director McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are no questions, I would move that we approve the staff recommendation on item 28B.
Been moved by Director McLeod, second by Director Gallagher to move staff recommendation, agenda item 28B. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Let's move to 29A, please.
Morning, Andy Moore, CWCB staff. Let me bring up the PowerPoint quick. I heard it wasn't doing anything. This is agenda item number 25, underground storage pilot project grant requests. I have two requests to present to you for approval, $100,000 each. Last year, in last year's projects bill, Senator Sonnenberg put $200,000 in with this language. The blue highlight is really the key part that fits what we want to do with this $200,000. I worked with the two applicants that you're going to be presented to today to work on to shape a pilot project that fits the intent of this language. The first one is for Trout Creek Park in the Upper Ark, just south of Buena Vista, and the second is for Lost Creek in the South Platte Basin. Terry Skanga, the general manager of the Upper Ark, was going to be here today. However, because of the movement of the schedule and the weather, he regrets that he can't make it. For the second item for Lost Creek, I do have a couple of folks here that would like to speak when I get to that item. But first of all, for Trout Creek Park, the Upper Ark District has had a couple of multi-purpose storage projects involving underground storage that they've been working on. This one in question at Trout Creek Park and one closer to Salida. These are items that have been identified in the Arkansas BIP, and they've been working diligently to move these forward. This part for the Trout Creek Park project is to do some pilot work to see what the they've done some simple analytical work, all of the Glover method to look at timing from the recharge pond back to the river, and they want to use this grant to further work on a pilot aspect of this to see how feasible it's going to be and to plan for a phase 2. One of the things I've talked to Bill Tyner, the assistant division engineer for the Arkansas, and they're aware of this project, and they don't have any issues with it at this time and are willing to work with the applicant. One of the ideas about this, at first it may look like a simple augmentation project, but one of the things they're going to do with this is if credits hit the river when they're not needed, they're going to pump them back up and put them back in the ground. So they've got a system that they're planning to work out for that. Here's the site map that's also in your board memo. And again, this is just south of Buena Vista, right where the Trout Creek Pass Highway comes into the main highway there. They've already got some facilities in place, and this is just to help further to work on those. This was on the previous slide. Both of the sites, both this one and Lost Creek, were identified in the Senate Bill 2006-193 report that CWCB did. Both of these were highly ranked sites. They have the capacity. They're in a good location for the users, and this was certainly one of them in that area. Are there any questions on this site?
Questions for Andy? I don't believe so. Please continue.
Well, I just asked for the staff recommends that the board approve the $100,000 grant for this project.
Very good. We have staff recommendation before us. It is an action item. Director Wells.
I move staff recommendation.
It's been a motion by Director Wells, second by Director McLeod to move staff recommendation, agenda item 29A. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's go to 29B, if you would,
Okay.
please, Andy.
Again, 29B is for the Lost Creek Alluvial Aquifer Storage Pilot Project. Lost Creek has been looked at many times by many different interests for storage, and CWCB has funded a couple of studies on Lost Creek through the WSRF, for example. The CGS did an intensive study of that several years ago. It's a designated basin. It's been slowly, in a sense, mined of groundwater for decades, and so it has a lot of storage capacity, and it's in a somewhat strategic location. It's part of the South Platte storage study. It's currently ongoing as a potential alternative to use in conjunction with other surface storage possibilities. It's got a lot of good things about it, but so far there's been just more of these studies done, not really in the boots on the ground type work. This pilot project proposed would do more on the ground field work to look at, okay, there's been on this site map that's in your board packet, right in the center there, outlined with a purple ellipse, there is a target area that is the best part of the Lost Creek Aquifer to put water in. So for this study or this field work, they're going to go in there and do more tests, percolation tests, look at other issues, geophysical, to get a better handle on how feasible is it. There's several partners involved in this. City of Castle Rock, City of Aurora is actually the applicant. I've got representatives from Leonard Rice Engineers as well as the City of Castle Rock. The City of Aurora was planning to come but couldn't make it, and they have a statement they provided to be read on their behalf. But also, of course, involved is the Lost Creek Groundwater Management District. The intent is this to be a collaborative project with all the parties, and to look at the possibility of using this as a storage vessel that Lost Creek District would also benefit from. Again, this was a highly ranked site in that Senate Bill 193 report, and it's another site that's been identified in the South Platte Metro BIP. I'll answer any questions here, but I also have Dave Colvin from Leonard Rice Engineers and Matt Binnock from the City of Castle Rock.
Any questions for Andy at this point in time? Well, maybe at this time, would you read the letter and then we can have those other two gentlemen, if they would like to come up and present their, okay, great, that'd be fine, thank you. If you would just identify yourself, if you would, please.
Morning, Dave Colvin with Leonard Rice Engineers, and I can answer any questions, but I would just like to start by reading a statement by Aurora Water, and can answer questions after that. So on behalf of Aurora Water recently completed its integrated water management plan, in which we identified the need for additional terminal storage to meet our future needs and more effectively manage our system. While surface storage reservoirs has been our traditional approach to addressing our storage needs, we have been giving increasing consideration to aquifer storage and recovery, ASR, as a viable alternative. In January 2017, we began discussions with Leonard Rice and the town of Castle Rock regarding development of an application under Senate Bill 2016-174 to fund a pilot project for ASR in the Lost Creek Basin. Aurora Water agreed to act as the fiscal agent for the CWCB grant if approved. While there have been a number of regional studies for Lost Creek, we believe this site-specific investigation will ultimately provide us insight into the viability of performing an extensive and long-term aquifer storage operation within Lost Creek. This investigation will not just benefit Aurora and Castle Rock, but any entity with a stake or an interest in Lost Creek will stand to gain. Aurora Water and Castle Rock are committed to working together to see this project come to fruition, and each have committed $25,000 financially with some in-kind services, and Leonard Rice has committed to contribute in-kind services as well. Discussions with other entities may also result in additional matching contributions to the project. As a stakeholder, Lost Creek Groundwater Management District will provide guidance during this and ensuing phases. We see this investigation as the first phase in a larger pilot study to determine if full-scale aquifer storage program within the Lost Creek Basin is physically and economically viable. The first phase will conduct the necessary site-specific investigations to quantify the physical groundwater basin characteristics and aid in our selection of productive locations for infiltration basins and recovery wells, resulting in the development of a more robust pilot program to test and verify ASR viability. In fact, we anticipate that the next phase of this pilot program would be a worthy candidate for a subsequent application under the Colorado Water Plan funding discussed earlier in this CWCB meeting under item 9 on the agenda. Results from the first phase of this project, if approved, should provide valuable information to develop such an application. Does anybody have any questions?
Question for Dave? I don't believe so. Matt, would you like to speak on behalf of Castle Rock?
Good morning. My name's Matt Bennock. I'm the Water Resources Manager with the town of Castle Rock. Our interest in this project really lies in a future water development project that we are planning in the Box Elder Basin, which is one basin to the west of the Lost Creek Basin. We've recently closed on some water rights, about 1,000 acre-feet of water within the Lost Creek Basin, and have done some studies of the viability of storage within that basin as well. So that's really where our interest lies, and certainly interested in how we might be able to store that water for future reduce evaporative losses, and interested certainly in partnerships with entities such as Aurora, maybe some various irrigation districts within the area and the Lost Creek Groundwater Management District. So certainly happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Matt? Thank you for making that trip over. Appreciate it. We do have staff recommendation in front of us. It is an action item. Director Wells.
I move approval of staff's recommendation for item 29B.
Motion by Director Wells, second by Director Gallagher to move staff recommendation, agenda item 29B. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. At this point in time, we will move to agenda item 27, and it should be 27A.
Okay, again, Anna Moss for the record, agenda item 27A. I was actually just in the hallway with these borrowers saying, make a U-turn. We're so far ahead of schedule. I don't think you're even going to get here before the meeting might adjourn. So they said, are you sure? And I said, yes, I'll cover for you guys. So anyway, they were intending to be here. It was Pete Foster from Wright Water Engineers and Alden Hess with the Florida Consolidated Ditch Company. And so anyway, so I'll jump in here now as I was not quite prepared to go at this moment. So this is a loan request from the Florida Consolidated Ditch Company. It may sound a little bit familiar to you all. They were approved for a Water Supply Reserve Fund grant back in September of 2015. That was for $775,000. And part of that grant that we wrote it sort of in two phases. So the first phase was to do the feasibility work to get to this point for the loan. And then that second phase of the contract will be for the construction And the project is to pipe the lateral. CDOT intends to widen State Highway 550, basically from Durango south to New Mexico. And this lateral follows the alignment of the highway pretty closely. And so CDOT said, hey, we can move your lateral just as it is, just in a little bit wider position within the right of way, or we'll give you $950,000. You guys go ahead, move it ahead of us as you can. And so the large agricultural producers were actually pretty excited about this because it would create a pressurized pipeline so they could take advantage of some more efficient irrigation practices. The NRCS anticipates this will save about 400 to 600 acre feet per year just because of seepage and evaporative losses. And then on top of that, they also estimated another 137 tons of salt load to the Animas River will be reduced as a result of this project. So to back up a little bit about the company, that's just a shot of what the lateral looks like right along that highway there. It's a mutual ditch company. They were formed in 2014. They've actually existed a lot longer. It was 4 ditch companies that came together, and that's the name that consolidated. It was all these different Florida companies. And so the company delivers water from the Florida River to about just under 19,000 acres. And then in addition, they also deliver water from a federal project. The Bureau in the early 1960s did the Florida project, which built Lemon Reservoir as some supplemental water for these irrigators. And so through the company's system, they also deliver that water. So this particular project is a pipeline that ranges from 27 inches down to 8 inches. It'll have 16 head gates and turnouts along the system, an intake pond to reduce some sediments into that pipeline. They'll replace a couple of different extensions also along there. And so their plan is to work on the final design this coming fall and then start construction in the fall of 2018. So the total project cost $2.8 million. Again, CDOT's putting in $950,000. The Water Supply Reserve Fund, they've spent about $100,000 of that so far. So, but in total, they already have $775,000 of grant funding. So they're looking for a little over $1 million in the loan to complete that project. And so if we look at that, it comes out to annual payments of a little over almost $52,000 per year at the ag rate of 1.8% for 30 years. This one's a little bit interesting in that in reality, only those users along the lateral will pay back this loan, but the company knows they're all on the hook for the debt because the debt, or the collateral rather, is that pledge of assessment revenues from the entire company plus the project itself. And they understand that, but they really plan just to have those users really fund the bulk of that. So it'll be about $1,100 per year per user, kind of depending on how much water they use for the repayment of this. So with that, I would gladly take any questions from you.
Questions for Anna? I don't think so. Oh, Director Wells.
I was looking for some potential environmental benefit. I see why CDOT isn't paying the whole bill because they're going to pressurize it. And there is reduction of salt loading. I was just wondering if there's any benefit that comes from undergrounding the pipe and recontouring the landscape or something like that.
That's a great question, and truth be told, I don't know the answer. I know they've been through all of their environmental permitting processes so far, and a lot of that was done as part of the CDOT, as part of their environmental permitting. The company kind of just ride those coattails, and I don't know the answer to that.
Any other questions? I believe we're ready for.
Well, no, not a question. Do you want to talk about staff recommendation, or do you want to?
Yeah, so it's as in your memo, and yeah, if you have any questions or further questions, I'd love to take them.
Director Montgomery.
I would move staff recommendation.
We have a motion by Director Montgomery, second by Director Wells to move staff recommendation, agenda item 28 or 27A. Further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Let's move to 27B, if you would, please.
Hello, Jonathan Hernandez, CWCB staff. For the record, presenting agenda item 27B. This is a project called the Dry Gulch Reservoir Land Acquisition. The borrower for this project is the San Juan Water Conservancy District. Rod Profit's the chair of the board of directors, and he's in the audience if you have any questions for him after the presentation. They are seeking a $2 million loan amount, and that $2 million will include the service fee. So an even $2 million, and the loan terms will be 30 years at 2.55%, which is the low-income municipal rate. The San Juan Water Conservancy District is located here in Archuleta County. They cover about 100 square miles, and within the district is about 90% of the entire county's municipal and industrial uses. The mission of San Juan is to conserve, develop, utilize, and plan storage for current and future water needs within its boundaries. To that end, they've been looking at developing the Dry Gulch Reservoir site. It is located about 6 miles from here, so pretty close. And for those that were on the board tour, we met, one of the stops was at this project site. And we were standing at a near spot where this picture here was taken. So again, the Dry Gulch site is actually fairly well suited for a reservoir. It's pretty evident when you stand out there that you can almost see it. So eventually, this isn't part of the project now, but the long term will be to dam up the valley right about there, and then the reservoir will fill in behind that. And the current plan is for 11,000 acre-foot reservoir. The site here is showing the blue is roughly the pool. Don't use this for a legal map by any means, but that's roughly the pool area. The green, the outline in the green, was the Weber property. The purple is U.S. Forest Service property, and then the red is Laverty property that the reservoir pool all touches. So trying to give a very, very brief history on the Dry Gulch project. 1960s was when the first conditional water right for this reservoir was filed, and that was by Southwestern Water Conservancy District. When San Juan was formed in 87, that water right was transferred to San Juan, and they became the project lead for the Dry Gulch. In 2002, there was a memorandum of understanding between PAWS, which is Pagosa Area Water and Sand District, and San Juan Water Conservancy District. And in that MOU, PAWS really took the lead on the Dry Gulch project. In 2008, PAWS was approved for an $11 million loan by the CWCB board, and San Juan was approved for a $1 million grant to go towards purchasing land underneath the reservoir pool, the future reservoir pool. In 2013, that MOU was terminated. PAWS decided that this would not be their primary focus, and San Juan regained the project lead for Dry Gulch. And to touch a bit more on the history of the 2008 loan, that loan was to purchase the Weber and the Laverty property, and the loan acknowledged that the Forest Service would have to be dealt with at some future time, but the 2008 loan was not specific for the Forest Service land. The outcome of that loan was that the Weber property, about 660 acres, was purchased with the loan and the grant. However, before the Laverty property was purchased, PAWS determined that they would no longer be actively pursuing the project, and so they closed out the loan without purchasing the Laverty property. PAWS closing out the loan led to a three-way agreement with CWCB, PAWS, and San Juan. Thick, complicated agreement. Essentially, it provided San Juan as the project lead going forth, and it required San Juan to continue to pursue purchasing the Laverty and the U.S. Forest Service land, and eventually continue pursuing this project. So this 2017 loan request is by San Juan. It's continuing the agreement that they are to continue best efforts to secure the land underneath the reservoir pool. So the loan request that's in front of us now is specific for the Laverty property, to purchase that property, and to find a land trade for the U.S. Forest Service. They can't simply purchase the land by the U.S. Forest Service. They must instead purchase other suitable land and make a trade for the Forest Service. And so that will be accomplished under this loan. They will also have some fencing of areas and other permitting environmental compliances. but the main aspects is securing the land under the reservoir, which will allow them now to continue planning for a project that may take 10 plus years to fully implement. The financials of the company, or not the company, sorry, the district, they show average with the ratios. The past few years, they actually show weak. They are based on a mill levy. The mill levy has been reduced per Tabor requirements, and they have spent in the last 3 years quite a bit of funds above the normal budget in preparing, negotiating the three-way agreement, continuing on looking at this project. And essentially, this project will require a mill levy increase, and that will require a vote at an upcoming election. So the financials looked, when we looked at the future, it was assuming the mill levy could be increased to 1. And as long as that happens, then the district is in great financial shape to handle this loan. The district cannot handle this loan if the mill levy is not increased. Therefore, one of the conditions on the contract is that approval of this is contingent upon a mill levy increase being approved by voters at an upcoming election. We've added other contract conditions that you can see on the staff recommendation. Number 2 and 3 is the first right of refusal on the land that's purchased by CWCB, and that loan will be due within 6 months if at some point this land is sold off and essentially the project is abandoned. Those conditions mimic the conditions on the Weber property from the three-way agreement. And then the fourth is just to state that we will not be dispersing more than 100% of an appraised value. So as they go with negotiations with the landowners, CWCB funds will be limited to what the property is actually appraised for. And with that, you have the staff recommendation, the additional conditions that staff recommends, and I'm available for questions, as is Rod Profit.
Director McLeod.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the staff recommendation and those conditions that you just mentioned, and I understand the concept, but the sentence in number 3 is very confusing. So let me make it go at it this way. We spent quite a bit of time on that loan renegotiation on the previous one, and if you're going to utilize the same documentation, which has similar terms or the same terms, then I'll be comfortable with the exception. But as it's written in number 3, it doesn't make much sense.
And the intent of these conditions, especially 2 and 3, was to provide the desired outcome and not the exact wording that will fall into the contract. As you've referenced, the three-way agreement is lengthy, and I didn't feel it would be prudent to try to list out 2 pages of.
No, I appreciate that.
So I apologize if it's a little confusing. If you have suggestions, I'd be more than willing to make them here, or knowing that it's a concept, not word for word, that will be on the contract.
I just want you to assure me you're going to use the same language we developed for the previous agreement, because that addresses these issues as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If there aren't any other questions, Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the staff recommendation.
Hang on just a second. Rod, would you like to address the board before we get any further here in the discussion part?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Rod Profit. I'm the president of the board for San Juan Water Conservancy District. I have 4 members of my board here. Ray Finney is here, Susan Nossaman is here, John Porco is here, and Al Pfister is here. And the guy that helped me write the feasibility study, or vice versa, I think Steve did most of the work actually. Steve Harris, our engineer, is also here, if there are any questions relative to that. But first, I'd like to welcome you all to Pagosa. It's wonderful to be here. I think this is Director Montgomery's suggestion that you come here as a last request, and I think this is your first time ever being here for a CWCB meeting, so I appreciate you making the effort. And ironically, we have this application pending, so it was great for us. Last time I talked to you, I think I had to go all the way up to northern Colorado to address the board. So this was much better from my perspective. To answer Director McLeod's question, Jonathan and I passed around multiple emails trying to figure out how we might incorporate the language from the three-way agreement into the deal, but we couldn't do it unless we doubled the size of this agreement. So it just seemed better to reference it and make sure that we make the two coincidental to one another. So that's how we wound up doing what we're doing. But I appreciate the board being here. I appreciate your vote. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions for Rod? All right, we have a motion by Director McLeod, second by Director Montgomery. Further discussion, Director Wells.
I just wanted to comment. I remember the three-way agreement and recognizing that the San Juan district stepped into a bad situation and have been working hard to make it better. So I appreciate those efforts. It looks like you're on your way to doing what needs to be done, and I'm hoping your mill levy passes.
Yes, we were able to put the past behind us. It took 4 years of me doing shuttle diplomacy to get it done. Pause would not spend a dime on making something happen. They just wanted out of the agreement. So it's fortunate that we were able to work something out that was a benefit to all of us.
I believe we are ready for the vote. Let the recommendation state it's been moved and seconded for agenda item 27B with the additional conditions by Director McLeod. And well done. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by an aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I believe we're on to agenda item 31.
Morning.
Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Chairman. I am the sole survivor of the four that were going to be here at 2:30, but I will do my best to tell you what we were going to do. My name is Ellen Roberts, and I used to represent 8 counties here in Southwest Colorado. What I'm here for, though, is to touch base with you on the Animas River Community Forum, which is a group that has received your support in the past. And what we were trying to do in coming to you today and recognizing that you've got concerns about the weather, and I'm very familiar with that experience, just in the reverse direction. We wanted to thank you, one, for coming down here. As Mr. Prophet just said, it's always great when we have folks who come down this way so you can have that firsthand view. But what we were hoping to do is just give you a little educational segment, which again will be cut short, but about what the Animas River Community Forum is about. I don't need to tell you about the Gold King mine spill. You all know about it very well. And certainly the state had a hand in responding to that. But what we experienced as a community, and by we I mean I individually live 8 miles outside of Durango, but the Animas River is critically important to all of us for its water supply, its impact on the community, but there is that component that is quality of life that's so important to many of us down here. And of course, none of us, given our tourism economy, wanted to see us splashed globally with that yellow river. So in the immediate aftermath, the question was, what can we do as a community to respond? And again, with all due respect to those who don't live there, the state was, I'm going to give the state a B+ or A in terms of response, because between the CPW, public health and environment, there were others, but the governor, leave out the part where he drank some of the water. That wasn't our high point, but the state did respond well. The feds, obviously, we all know the role of the EPA in that. But what we learned through the Gold King mine spill was it's not about who from DC or even from Denver can be there to help us through that immediately thereafter. It is what the community itself has gone through. And I describe community pretty broadly. We're talking about all the way up to San Juan County through the Animas course and down into New Mexico and the Navajo Nation. So, but most immediately it was waiting for the slug, as it was called, to arrive from Silverton. The folks in Silverton saw it, but weren't immediately impacted in the way that I think the Animas River people down in Durango actually started experiencing it. So what we wanted to tell you was the Animas River Community Forum, which enjoyed the great support from Southwestern Conservation District as well, helped us get off the ground. But the point was CDPHE is really more geared to spills along a highway into a watershed. So there were emergency management plans that were geared for something like that, but nothing at the tune of 3 million gallons coming down the river. I was standing on the banks of the Animas on North Durango, waiting for it to come through, and had a lot of people asking me what could be done. And that was really the hard part, was knowing it was coming and not knowing what to do. And our law enforcement, frankly, was Durango Police Department. Our La Plata County sheriffs were doing everything they could to spread the word. But I watched young people who thought it might be a cool thing to get in the river and ride the wave as it came down from Silverton. It's really, it's a little perplexing at times to see how human beings respond to something like 3 million gallons of spill coming down your way. But what we did with the Animas River Community Forum, and we're developing a PowerPoint, and we're to the point now where we've not completed the work we need to do in our community, but we are to the point where we want to share our lessons learned. And you will have before you in July, and you'll get our PowerPoint then by Shannon Manfredi, who is our coordinator of the group. She'll give that to you then. But what we really saw was if communities could do something beforehand, and by communities, it's everything of our size in Durango, but it might be Silverton, Uray, Telluride, it might be up in Boulder County, it might be Clear Creek. There are so many places this could happen, and I know you all have seen the map, I'm sure, of 227 mines, abandoned mines across the state of Colorado. So what we're in part of our healing process, if I can call it that, it is if we had to go through this, then what can we do to improve the situation? social media coming in August, which is towards the end of our rafting season, but certainly not what we want as our tourism brand. So trying to address the mistrust of information that the public had about us, the lack of public confidence in government, not something I was unfamiliar with, but it certainly was, even when the state was saying, here's what our data looks like, the feds were saying, this is what our data looks like. The EPA was using some terminology that didn't match what the state was, so you had apples to oranges, and people just wanted to know, can we drink the water? And it's interesting because the Animas isn't really supplying Durango directly, but is a secondary source, but it's so visible to the people in Durango, and it was so critically important for us to get the word out. So we're still working on things like the alert notification plan, but we've got a lot of people at the table. We're now, like I said, to the point of telling the story as we finish the last details. I wanted to thank CWCB, and so did the other folks who would have been here. Thank you for your help, because we're not a typical CWCB water project. We recognize that. It's also a group that hopes that, we don't anticipate becoming another one of Durango's nonprofits, unending lifetime kind of thing. But we don't really want to close the door before we feel like we've done a complete job. So there's a mining conference up in Uray that we'll be speaking at. There's the Avon conference in the fall that some of our members are going to go to, and assuming that we get accepted into that. But again, before we disband formally as the forum, but what we want to retain, whether the forum exists or not, is that network to, if there is another spill, how do we take advantage of what we went through? So with that, I'll just stop there. And if there if you have any questions, again, we know when we bring forward in July the project, it's a very short thing, and this was meant to be more educational or helpful to you if you had any questions.
Director Montgomery.
Thanks, Ellen, for coming down and giving us an update on this, because I had been really curious, and you were really watched all around the region. And I know the San Miguel Watershed Coalition has been looking at you closely, because any community around here, we all live with abandoned mines, and it was a wake-up call. But I'm curious, can you just expand a little bit more on the future? You were saying you're disbanding. Does that mean that you have no more need for funds, that you're not going to have a budget or anything, but then you're going to be in the be ready position if something would happen again?
So maybe I shouldn't have talked about the hope that we disband, because we're going to be coming to you in July with the hope that we don't disband right away. But what we want to do is make sure that the communication network is solid, that we also have done our best to restore public trust in the quality of the Animas River. And there's still tests that are being performed now that are somewhat reassuring, actually, about the impact on the environment. And again, we were lucky in the sense that the river's still moving pretty quickly when it comes through Durango. As it slows down, as it approaches New Mexico, there could be some more issues, but having a good spring and good spring runoff is another nice thing. So we don't feel like we're quite there yet, and you'll hear in July why we would like some additional funding just to complete our to-do list. But we also didn't want to create something that just went on indefinitely. That again, many of our communities are very rich in nonprofits, and so we didn't want to just add one more list. We really are a forum of existing stakeholders.
Director Montgomery.
And this is really just to the board. It's sort of a plug. After this happened, and then working with the San Miguel Watershed Coalition that wanted to, and talking to Travis about what they'd done with the Rio Grande, and what we learned was the importance of getting out in front, because at any point in these communities where we live, a fire could hit, a mine spill could hit, and to have the forum created prior is really critical. And we have watershed coalitions, but they're not necessarily all the right people. And, you know, as Ellen's talked about, it's so important to get that forum together. So anyway, San Miguel Watershed Coalition is in the process of trying to formulate that. But what we realize is there's not a lot of good funding sources for that. I mean, and looking at some of the funds and the money that the board has, I don't see a good source for this type of a collaborative group. And I consider this just as important as the wild and scenic alternative groups. And I guess sort of a little bit of my comment yesterday was, and I know that money was legislative, but if we could think about a source for these kind of collaborative groups, I think it would be money well spent and a good thing for the board to think about.
Director Gallagher.
Thanks for coming here, Senator Roberts. I'm wondering if you can say anything about how the city has the city initiated any program to try to help its citizenry understand such an event? I mean, this is helpless when you have they're somewhat helpless sitting there out there watching or waiting for the slug to come through. Have they responded in any way internally or to develop programs or awareness programs that are tied into what you're trying to do?
No, and I don't think, I think the city of Durango and La Plata County actually have been busy dealing with the EPA and reimbursement issues. And one of the things that we had as a baseline at the very front of this forum is we're not doing blame. We're not doing shame, blame, you know, all that. Not that all of us probably didn't have, including myself, deep emotional response to this, but it was not helpful to go there with a blame game. And so I think it's the city and the county. One of our county commissioners, who I think joined you for a bit yesterday, has been active in the forum. The city, I think they were relieved that we exist as a forum and that we're doing the work, but I think they are preoccupied. And to what April said, we also see it as forest health, watershed protection, very important to us in our region, that it isn't solely mine spills, future mine spills, but we've been through Missionary Ridge, we've been through other fires, and we know our watershed is at risk. I would just like to make a plug, and I'm sure you're the group I don't need to make a plug to, but that we need to proceed with the water plan and funding the water plan. And that, again, to April's point, that we should be prepared. And if you're not out in front of it, it's like getting hit by a Mack truck. And I don't think any community can get precisely aware, but if they could take a little bit of the horror that they experienced. I know when that particular summer, I was chairing the Water Interim Committee. When we were in Salida, there were people who had driven over there from Crescent Butte area because they were desperate to hear what could they be doing. There was in other communities, including on the Front Range, there were people saying, what could we do, knowing that everybody's sort of sitting on this time bomb, just not knowing when it's going to blow up in their area. So getting out ahead. And again, I think the city, I know that Kathy Metz from our Parks and Rec was involved at the very front end, but people had their plates very full on the local government level. And I've feel like they are very glad we're where we are as a forum, what we've done. And again, I want to just thank Southwestern for having been such a strong support at the front end, because it doesn't happen naturally. And it does take a certain amount of self-discipline and organization to the group when emotions are so high.
Director Randall.
Thank you. I might just pile on a little bit and just make a comment, and that is to thank you for your leadership at the time, just both as chair of the Interim Water Committee and just as a local community member that's trusted in a leadership position. So thank you for that. It was within those first few days that we started to look at REACT down in the Rio Grande and sort of the value of bringing people together for common purpose around this. So thank you. Thanks to Southwestern for helping to get that off the ground. We were trying to do all that we could through Parks and Wildlife, through the Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety, which was up there, and then certainly through CDPHE and the water quality work that they're doing in the context of designation of the Bonita Peak Mining District as a Superfund site and are on the NPL list. So anyway, I just really wanted to acknowledge the really important role that you played personally. So thank you.
Thank you. I would say there was some sort of therapeutic value. It was either that or looking like the marmot. I don't know if you've ever seen the little GIF, but it's a marmot who's screaming at the top of a mountain. That's really how I felt, but I felt like it was probably more productive to channel it into something like this.
I know the feeling. So.
Yeah.
Director Wells.
Good morning. Thank you for coming over here to talk to us about this effort. I'm curious as to how what you learned, how that would be related to or distinguished from emergency management preparedness of other types. It's much broader. It's more a socio and economic approach to what the community is experiencing. So on the emergency management, it's the immediate response of, and there's little you can do, frankly. Emergency management to me would be radio communications. It would be, is there any antidote you can put in the watershed before it gets into a water supply, those types of things. We had, and Director Randall was very helpful. Division of Mining, Reclamation, and Safety has been with us from the get-go at the table of the forum and still is. And Mike King was answering my cell phone calls that day. Of course, we were having a CPW recognition banquet in Durango. So we were lucky that we had a few people in town in the sense that they were keenly aware that everybody's faces turned a little more white after lunch. As the news started to circulate, we were all pretty happy at lunch, but then it kind of got a little more sober. But I would say emergency management has a very limited role and certainly doesn't see their part in what's the economic impact to the rafting community? How soon can fishermen get back in the river? What about, I had mothers with young children coming down who said, I chose to live near this river because of the quality of life. Is it destroyed now? And emergency management is not at all prepared to deal with those kinds of things. And, again, we're talking about the abandoned mines. So in terms of who's responsible, it's a short list.
Any other questions? Dr. Stolp.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Roberts, always good to see you. And something you touched on triggered an incident that happened recently. I was in a group that a person expressed a concern on what a watershed was. And those of us in this business kind of assume everybody knows what a healthy watershed is in some ways. And so I think there's certainly an opportunity here for your efforts as well as this board's efforts to continue this education and outreach that's spoken about in the water plan with a number of people moving into our great state, that they oftentimes don't understand what we talk about in some of these terms of a watershed. And this person thought maybe it's a place where you stored water, and technically it is, I guess, but they thought it was kind of a brick and mortar type of thing. So I don't think we can ever underestimate the value of educating a community. Even some of us have been in the community for a number of years. So thank you for your effort, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. And I will say it's somewhat human nature too to want to move past something that's kind of a disaster. And we find that with wildfires as well. So the sooner people can see it in their rear view mirror, the happier they are. But that's a scary thought because maybe we aren't doing enough. And educationally, I think that is really important for people to understand that that wasn't a one-time Colorado experience. And there's more to come without being too gloomy. And I really hope you all get back very safely to wherever you're traveling. And again, thank you for coming down to our corner. And I know, Mr. Chairman, this is about as far away as you can get from where you're from, because I've done it in reverse. And so thank you for being here.
Well, we truly appreciate the presentation today, and we look very much forward to future discussions with you and your group. So very, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're getting close to being done today. One item I would like to talk about before we do adjourn is on behalf of the board, I would very much like to thank you, the Southwest Basin folks, for having us here. We very much enjoyed it. You're wonderful hosts, and I just can't say enough of we truly enjoyed ourselves here, and we truly do appreciate it. So thank you very much. Acting Director Riss, do we have anything
Thank you,
else?
Mr. Chairman. No, that was the last item we have today. I know we're, what, about 4 hours ahead of schedule. So thank you, everyone, for being so flexible as we all try and get back, hopefully before the worst of the storm hits. Just a quick announcement for the board. I think we had lunch coming. We'll call it brunch. When? In 10 minutes, maybe? Okay. So feel free to grab a sandwich and take it on the road with you.
Oh, and
Oh,
yes, thank you for pointing that out, Dr. Stolp. There are gift bags here, the compliments of Pagosa Springs. Again, another thank you, and please feel free. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Director Gallagher, second by Director McLeod. And all those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
We are officially adjourned.